If Trump is good and Julian Assange helped Trump, does that make Assange good? We begin with Michael Gerson on this topic this morning as I broadcast or record this. It's Saturday morning, January the 7th. And this is another one of those topics, the whole Julian Assange, WikiLeaks, Russian hacking of 2016 election, and did it help Trump get elected, which it didn't. See, let me reiterate this, folks. I put this Russian hack job in the same category as voter fraud, in the sense that, yes, it took place. No, it didn't determine the outcome of the election any more than voter fraud does, any more than voter fraud did 4 years ago when Barack Obama was reelected in 2012. Sure, there was voter fraud. Was it enough to overcome 5 million votes and however much it was, 68, 74 electoral votes? No, it wasn't. Voter fraud did not get Barack Obama reelected, and Russian hackers didn't get Donald Trump elected. But it did take, both did take place. And therefore, that's some serious you-know-what, and it should be investigated. It's a serious topic. I mean, a foreign power trying to influence our elections, is that something we want at all, or is it just something we don't want if it hurts our party or your party or whatever, but you think it's just fine as long as it hurts the other party? See, this is why partisan tribalism is a desperately bad thing, ladies and gentlemen. And that's what Gerson addresses in his lead, in his first sentence. One of the most confusing shifts of the Trump ascendancy is, on reflection, one of the most clarifying. Donald Trump, Sarah Palin's, and Sean Hannity's embrace of Julian Assange, who has made a career of illegally obtaining and releasing documents damaging to U.S. interests, is not just a puzzling policy shift, it is the triumph of, ta-da, political tribalism over, well, every other principle and commitment. And let's be clear about this. Back in 2010, Sarah Palin was criticizing and condemning Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, and same thing with Sean Hannity. Hannity was calling Assange a traitor and an enemy of the United States, and so on and so forth. Donald Trump was calling for Julian Assange's execution. The communist Chinese, why, they would take a guy out like Assange and execute him. They'd put a bullet through his head. Oh, but now, all of a sudden, Julian Assange is a hero! Yay! Quite an about-face for these people. All three leaders of allegedly right-wing populism once saw the risk. Not long ago, Trump recommended, like I say, the death penalty for Assange. Now he publicly sides with him against U.S. intelligence services. Palin urged the United States to go after Assange with the same urgency we pursue Al-Qaeda. Now we have seen her abject pleading, "Julian, I apologize." Hannity once called for Assange's arrest. Now he provides a sympathetic platform for Assange's and thus Vladimir Putin's views. By the way, Trump supporters, Putin is not a friend, he's an enemy. Now let's be clear about what this means, folks. The President-elect of the United States is elevating a man whom the Director of National Intelligence, James Copper Clapper Caper, holds responsible for putting the lives of operatives in direct danger. In 2008, Republican vice presidential nominee, or the 2008 Republican vice presidential nominee is bowing and scraping to the man who materially aided the Taliban. Fox News is now an outlet for the Russian version of events. Fox News is Russia Today, in effect. All this raises practical questions. If I were a prospective intelligence asset, an Iranian nuclear scientist, say, or a North Korean general, why in the world would I cooperate with a country that can't keep secrets and apparently doesn't care to? How will the CIA and other intelligence agencies deal day to day with a president who distrusts and publicly defames them? And yeah, I know. Oh, they're pumped full of Democrats. To a degree. But, not entirely. The CIA is not the DNC. And besides which, if you think that that we need intelligence reform, purge all the Democrats out of there, then propose it. Propose it. Don't just say, they don't know anything. They're incompetent. They didn't see, all the criticisms of that the left made, hint, of our intelligence agencies regarding weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, for example. That's long been a Trump trope. If it's very simple. If Trump really truly considers U.S. intelligence agencies to be incompetent and in need of improvement and reform, then let him propose it. Don't do it this way. This is the difference between actually giving a damn about U.S. intelligence capabilities and just engaging in petty, personal, vindictive, partisan feuds. But the most illuminating question is this. What changed about Assange between these dramatically evolved judgments? Answer: nothing. Except that Assange hurt John Podesta, Hillary Clinton, and the Democrat Party, so now he's a hero! Is he still anti-American? Yes. Is he still pro-Russian? Yes. So now the Republican Party is anti-American and pro-Russian, in effect. I've seen it, folks. I've seen it from Trump supporters. It would be difficult to formulate a purer example of motivated reasoning in tribal politics. We are dealing with political and moral argument at this level. Trump is good, Assange helped him, so Assange is good. Remember, I tell you what, a lot of you Trump supporters out there who are on this bandwagon, and you all are if you're a Trump supporter, it wasn't that long ago that we used to lampoon and condemn the left for rooting for America's enemies if it helped them politically. Now that mindset has gone bipartisan, folks. Now that mindset has gone bipartisan. I said it back during the campaign that shouldn't it bother you if one of our country's enemies wants your candidate to win the election? Shouldn't that bother you? And I'm not talking about it in the context of, oh, then you're for Hillary, huh? No! Should it not seriously concern you and make you wonder and stop and think, take a step back and go, oh, wait a minute, what's going on here? If Vladimir Putin openly favors your candidate, which in this case was Donald Trump, over the other candidate, Hillary Clinton, why does Putin think that, why did Putin think that Trump winning the election will be better for him and his country? Him and his country, which are not our friends. Julian Assange, not our friend. Not America's friend. Well, I tell you what, remember in 2008, John McCain's campaign slogan, country before party? I've never been a fan of John McCain at all. He's been the bane of conservatism for years, but boy, I tell you, that slogan really has teeth, really has purchase right about now. It does not require Aristotle to understand that this is a child's view of ethics. In other words, the enemy of my enemy is not always my friend and oftentimes is just another enemy. I mean, the enemy of my enemy may be my friend, or he may be an international fugitive who effectively exposed intelligence sources and methods and gave advantages to America's enemies. That hasn't changed. Assange did do that. He's still doing it. The only difference is that now it helped Republicans. And Republicans should have been asking themselves, what? Wait a minute. How do we get in this position again? An enemy of this country is trying to help our candidate get elected? You know, question these things. I don't like the science channels. I guess it's their old slogan now, question everything. But boy, you damn sure, you Trump supporters, you should have been questioning that. In his Ethics 201, that some principles should be universally applied even when they conflict with our immediate interests or the interests of our own tribe. However that's defined. Where do those principles come from? Well, there's the golden rule, which pops up in different forms in many religions. There's the moral example of parents and mentors imprinted on our souls. There are various philosophic systems that force us to consider the views and interests of others. It needs to be said that loyalty to a tribe is not always a bad thing. Being an American is to belong to a flawed but wonderful tribe. Considering yourself a Republican or a Democrat, a conservative or a liberal, the member of a church or a club, all can be appropriate forms of loyalty when they're not taken too far. Our views and loves naturally bring us into contact and friendship with those who share our views and loves. The problem comes in the order of the loves. Hat tip St. Augustine. The argument we are seeing on Assange, if it hurts liberals, it is good, is a disordered and destructive form of service to Trumpism. And it is particularly disturbing in this case because Assange has purposely and undeniably hurt our country. And trying to help Trump get elected constitutes trying to hurt our country too. Same thing with Hillary. So it appears that the tribalism of ideology is actually deeper and more profound than the tribalism of being an American. And that is despicable. Or as Daffy Duck said it, despicable. I know this endorsement of politically expedient subversion has happened on the left as well. Which is the whole point. It's the whole point. Trump supporters, you have become the left. In every meaningful, substantive way, you have become the left. You have become what you once criticized, what you once condemned, what you once despised. Or, as Yosemite Sam put it, if you can't beat them, join them. Those who deny it, those who can only identify destructive tribalism in others, are part of the problem. Assange was a hero in seedier back streets of the left when he seemed to be an opponent of militarism and imperialism. Now, Trump is bad. Assange is helping Trump, so Assange is bad, and the CIA is suddenly the voice of reason. But this problem is currently more pronounced on the right, which has become the left, since it controls just about everything in Washington for now. For some allegedly right-wing, forget right-wing, alt-right, let's just get this correct, National Socialist populists, for them, anyone who opposes Trump is the enemy. I see it every day, folks. The same attitude shifted to the White House might be applied by the president as anyone who opposes me is the enemy. And this will be the beginning of the nightmare. Or rather, the continuance of the nightmare of the past 8 years. Just a different face, but the same narcissism, the same tyranny, the same authoritarian instincts, ruled by the fist, or in this case, the Twitter fist. Now, Jonah Goldberg hasn't gone native. Jonah Goldberg hasn't sold out. Jonah Goldberg still retains his principles, and he builds on Mr. Gerson's piece at the Washington Post yesterday in a syndicated column by just standing flat out. Julian Assange is still an enemy of America, even if he has helped Republicans. And again, Republicans should be saying, wait a minute, how did we get on Julian Assange's side? How did this happen? Maybe we made a mistake in nominating Trump. Gee, you think? Now, it's a natural human tendency to want all good things to go together and all bad things to go together. Black and white, no shades of gray. That's just not the way the world works, unfortunately. I mean, hey, if it did, that'd make life a lot easier, wouldn't it? And it would put philosophy courses on college campi out of business. Of course, well, I shouldn't say that because who knows what's in college philosophy courses now. I mean, when I took one, but that was over 30 years ago. So now it's probably all that transgender gay marriage foolishness and 58 different genders and all that nonsense. But anyway, see, that's why we don't like hearing that Hitler built great roads and was kind to animals, or that Mahatma Gandhi could be petty and nasty, like somebody I know on Facebook. In other words, we hate hearing good things about our villains and bad things about our heroes. I'm not talking about sandwiches. This sort of thinking is downstream of, here's that word again, tribalism. The essence of tribal thinking boils down to the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and the friend of my enemy is my enemy. The politics has its own kind of tribalism as well, bending facts and principles to partisan loyalties. The clearest sign that one is given over to a kind of tribal partisanship is when someone, or whole groups of people, cannot countenance inconvenient truths. And I'm not talking about Al Gore and the polar bears. In the 1990s, for example, feminists had laid down a series of arguments about sexual harassment. Then Bill Clinton got in trouble. Now, rather than maintain the principles they'd been asserting or acknowledge the facts they found regrettable, they rallied to Clinton's defense. Remember that? In their rush to help him, they left behind the baggage of their credibility. But being moral supremacists, they didn't concede any of the credibility that they had actually, in fact, forfeited. You know, it's like my friend Jennifer Crawford, former colleague on a Republican forum way back in the late 90s or early aughts. Knew her online before that, going clear back to the Rush H. Limbaugh section of the Issues Forum on the old CompuServe Information Service in 1994. So in one form or another, I've never actually met her in person. This is the nature of the internet age. But she's someone I've known for going on 23 years online. And she endlessly talks about the hypocrisy of the left. And, oh, they're such hypocrites. Oh, the media is biased. And she keeps just going on and on and on. And it's like, you know what? I don't criticize her for doing it. It's true. Both of those things are true. But I just have never been able to go on a just continual endless length about it, because it's like, yeah, well, it's like if you don't like the color of the sky. If you don't like the fact that the sky is blue, and in another video, I suppose I could give you the scientific reasons why it's blue. But if you don't like that, well, what are you going to do about it? There's nothing you can do about it. If you don't like the fact that the sky is blue, then, you either do something about it or shut up. And it's better to shut up about it and just accept it. You don't have to like it, but accept it as just, okay, well, this is something I can't change, so, I'm not going to get too bent out of shape about it. Not good for one's emotional or physical health, right? Well, same thing with the left being hypocrites. Oh, how terrible, how hypocritical for feminists to rail on about sexual harassment and then defend Bill Clinton. Remember, was it Gloria Steinem who said, I think it might have been Gloria Steinem, or I know it was a prominent feminazi, who said that she would blow Bill Clinton herself if it meant that it would keep abortion legal, or words to that effect. I know it involved... So, the leftists are hypocrites. Well, gee, there's a surprise. There's a shock. But we weren't. The right was not. The right stood for something. Republicans stood for something. They stood for conservative principles. Weren't always perfect in carrying out those principles, Lord knows. But they stood for, they at least tried to stand for something. And now, well, that brings us to Julian Assange and the issue of Russian hacking. Now, Donald Trump and many of his supporters are having a hard time acknowledging the following: that Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, is an avowed enemy of the United States who has openly admitted and acted upon his animosity toward America. And again, that's the context in which you have Trump supporters need to ask themselves, why was he supporting our candidate then? A one-time TV host for Russia Today, a Vladimir Putin-directed propaganda network, Assange is, if not in the employ of Russia, then objectively in service to it. The government of Russia, through surrogates and proxies, meddled in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. Didn't get Trump elected. It wasn't decisive. It didn't have that level of impact, but they did try to meddle, much as they have done Russians have done in numerous other countries. The Russians used WikiLeaks as a very effective tool for their mischief. That mischief probably had some effect on how the election played out. Well, I don't know. I don't think it did. Maybe I'll have to differ with Joda on that one. I don't think it did. Like I say, for the same reason that voter fraud didn't get Barack Obama reelected 4 years ago. I mean, at best, it's impossible to quantify, which is what I told people, what I told my one-time friend Douglas V. Gibbs 4 years ago when he said, oh, Romney really won the election, but voter fraud stole it from him. Well, I said, I really highly doubt that, but even if it did, there's no way to prove it because it worked. It worked. And, you know, to the winner go the spoils, and part of the spoils is not undermining their own victory, which is why you see Trump and his supporters scoffing and coughing and gagging at and ridiculing the idea that the Russians even hacked the election at all, or tried to. The truth is, they tried to, didn't make any difference. Trump would have won anyway. 100,000 votes. I mean, 100,000 votes in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. You know, that if you're talking about trying to hack actual voting machines, no, the scope is way too big for those means. And if you're talking about using WikiLeaks, well, then there's no way to quantify that. So why make the assertion? I mean, the truth is the Russians tried to use internet means, cyber means of influencing the U.S. election toward Donald Trump. But Trump would have won anyway. Because, guess, this just in. I know you may not have heard this before, but brace yourselves. Hillary Clinton was a terrible candidate. Horrible candidate. But let's put it this way. As bad as Trump was, Hillary was worse, and he didn't really need any help to defeat Hillary. The numbers bear that out. Russia, under Putin's authoritarian rule, seeks to undermine the legitimacy of American and Western democracy and to weaken NATO. That's his mission. Putin is a thug. Putin is a dictator. Putin is a mafioso. But Putin is an enemy of America. And the fact that he favored Donald Trump ought to have given Trump's supporters pause. I mean, I would at least stop and wonder why. Why does Putin, an enemy of America, favor our candidate? Maybe our candidate isn't what we thought he was. Of course, in order to have that degree of introspection, you have to throw partisan tribalism aside. It's like I said during the campaign. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are both in Vladimir Putin's back pocket. It's just the difference with Hillary is that Hillary would charge him for it. You know, put some more cash in the Clinton Foundation and then we'll do whatever you want. It's not like Hillary Clinton didn't do a ton of favors for Putin over the 4 years that she was Commissar of State. Remember turning over 20% of America's uranium supplies to a Russian corporation? Remember that? But, you see, it's like the difference between being a classy date and a cheap date. A classy date will require you to, okay, you got to buy me dinner, and you got to give me furs and jewels, and then maybe I'll put out. A cheap date is just throw your legs in the air and have at it. Hillary Clinton was the former, Donald Trump is the latter. You see, that's really the only real difference between the two. You know, Putin wanted to save money. And given the level of Russian foreign currency reserves, which, as I wrote at Political Pistachio a year ago, at that time, the Russians had about 18 months of foreign currency reserves left with the fall in energy prices, and Russia's economy is based almost entirely on energy resources. You know, they don't have a whole lot of cash, a lot of foreign currency reserves these days. So Putin was looking to save money. That could really be what it comes down to. Putin was willing to save, or wanted to save money, and knew that Trump wouldn't charge him. Trump wouldn't require him to make contributions to the Trump Foundation, which, by the way, in a smart move, Trump had shut down a week ago, or thereabouts, a week or two ago. And I complimented him for it. It was such a no-brainer. Why do you want to have something that is an exact duplicate of the Clinton Foundation? I mean, come on, put out your scandal fires before they begin, man. You want to have a successful presidency. But Trump, I mean, he just does whatever Putin tells him for free. And all Putin has to do, see, with Hillary, he had to, it was transactional. Putin had to ante up. All he has to do with Trump is stroke his ego. That's all it takes. And this is what makes Trump so manifestly unfit for the presidency and so dangerous. Any American enemy can have Trump wrapped around his little finger, proverbially speaking, just by saying nice things about him. That's all you have to do to get on Trump's good side. As long as you tell him how great he is, you can get anything you want from him. So here it brings us back to WikiLeaks again. See, Democrats and many people in the media are having a hard time admitting the following. All of the election-related documents leaked to and by WikiLeaks have been authentic and pertain to legitimate issues for news organizations to explore. Yeah, I mean, just this mutual tribalism, and it's just so maddening to see the party that I used to belong to and that left me in this recent campaign falling into the same diseased mindset. You know, Democrats, it's like, you know, Julian Assange is to the Republicans what James Comey was to the Democrats. Remember when James Comey announced back in July that the FBI was not going to prosecute, was not going to indict Hillary Clinton on Emailgate? And the Democrats just hailed James Comey as a statesman and a patriot and all that, on and on and on. And then when he brought up Emailgate again 10 days before the election, all of a sudden Democrats flipped on a dime and said and just started saying the most vile and condemnatory and just awful things about the same guy that they were feeding as a hero just 3 months earlier. And now it's the same thing with Julian Assange. You know, 6 years ago, during the last time WikiLeaks became a big deal and Julian Assange became a big deal, well, the Donald Trumps and the Sarah Palins and the Sean Hannitys couldn't condemn him enough. Now Assange is their new hero. I mean, everything. Tribalism has gone bipartisan. Tribalism has gone bipartisan, like I said in a video earlier this week. Everything is seen through the prism of, does it help us politically? And an enemy of the country is a friend of the party. Or vice versa. And they can't grasp how dangerous a mindset that is. You know, like I said, Democrats have been like this for decades. Democrats have been like this for, I don't know about my entire lifetime, but certainly the last half of it up to now. I mean, certainly starting with the Clinton years, the Democrats have just been totally, if it helps them politically, who cares what it does to the country? If it helps us politically, and Republicans, conservatives used to condemn that, used to ridicule that, and now they're just, you know, the Trump supporters are exactly the same now. This is the state of the country. This is how Barack Obama fundamentally transformed the Republican Party. Donald Trump. That simple. They decided, it's too difficult to stand on principle and fight for principles now. No, we got to go out and get our own tyrant. And that's what they did. And Putin tried to help them do it, but they managed to pull it off on their own, regardless of what Putin did. Now, the appointed leadership of the U.S. intelligence community, under Barack Obama in particular, has been politicizing intelligence. Remember downplaying ISIS and Islamic terrorism generally, hyping the extent of al-Qaeda's degradation, saw-peddling Iran's intentions, al-Qaeda's dead and GM's alive, and all that foolishness. That gets back to the intelligence reform. If you want to clean out all the leftists in the intelligence bureaucracy, be my guest. Be my guest, but don't. This is not the way to do it. Declaring PR war, propaganda war on your own intelligence apparatus ain't the way to do it. Be quiet and carry a big stick. Or in this case, legislation. Intelligence reform. You know, this is why you don't nominate people who don't know what they're doing. Skepticism toward what they say on the way out the door is warranted, though perhaps not on the way Trump has expressed it. Even if Russia meddled in the election, Trump was legitimately elected. Now, I consider all of these things to be true, but that leaves me, and many like me, I'm holding up my hand, in the middle of a partisan shooting war. Trump and his subalterns have found themselves in the position of rehabilitating Assange as some kind of heroic truth teller because they feel it necessary for political reasons. In 2010, again, as review. In 2010, Sarah Palin rightly described Assange as an anti-American operative with blood on his hands. This week, she apologized, grovelingly. In 2010, with a bit of hyperbole, Newt Gingrich declared, "Julian Assange is engaged in terrorism. He should be treated as an enemy combatant." This week, Gingrich told Sean Hannity, one of Assange's most prominent fans these days, that Assange is, quote, a down-to-earth, straightforward interviewee. In 2010, Michael Moore, Jabba the Hutt, put up $20,000 for Assange's bail. Remember, he'd been charged with rape in Sweden. Hey, it's your hero now, Trumplicans. Another of them. Because there is a concerted attempt to stop anybody that is trying to do the job of telling us the truth. And now Michael Moore says Trump has no right to be president because Russia's use of WikiLeaks truth-telling. The Huffington Post was initially enthralled by WikiLeaks, running pieces with such headlines as, "Let us now praise WikiLeaks." That was then. Now the Huffington Post, the Huff and Puffers hyperventilating, threatens to suck the oxygen out of the atmosphere. Of course, people are allowed to change their minds when new facts present themselves, but those facts should be relevant and, actually facts. You see, the problem is that the most pertinent facts about Assange, Russia, etc. have not changed. Assange is still an enemy of America. The Russians are still a geostrategic foe, to use Mitt Romney's phrase from the debate 4 years ago, of America. Nothing's changed, which is why Trump supporters should have gone, wait a minute. Why do the Russians want our candidate to win? Not in a Pavlovian, the same, just another kind of tribalism, but just think about it. What is it about Trump that Putin likes and wants in the White House when he's not a friend of America. The only truly relevant new fact is that Assange is a useful tool for Republicans, and all other facts must be bent on the left and the right to fit that new false reality. David French, at National Review yesterday, took us down the four key truths, the list of the four key truths of the WikiLeaks mess. It's unlikely that Julian Assange and the Russian government swung the election to Trump, but boy, they sure tried. And that's why their actions should be fully investigated nonetheless. I mean, their actions should be fully investigated regardless of whom it helped and who it hurt. If Putin had been, and the Russians have been trying to get Hillary Clinton elected, that should have been investigated. If that had been the case, that would merit investigation. Same thing as with Trump trying to get, or with the Russians, Putin trying to get Trump elected. Either way, we don't need foreign powers interfering in our elections, right? Period. Either way. I can't believe I'm actually having to stress this. It's a sign of our hyper-polarized times that we cannot seem to sort through the simplest of controversies. Yes, the debate over whether Russia used WikiLeaks and other means to attempt to influence the 2016 election is important, but that doesn't make it remotely complex. Factually and conceptually, there is ample ground for consensus. Let's start with four key truths. First, WikiLeaks is not our friend. It's been astonishing to watch attitudes shift on Julian Assange and company on the alt-right. When it was busy engineering and facilitating the largest intelligence leaks in American military history, WikiLeaks was praised by fringe figures on the left and universally reviled on the right. And now it's reviled on the left and praised on the right. This is unconscionable. It's despicable. WikiLeaks is not suddenly under new management, and Assange has not had a change of heart. He has targeted the American government time and again. He's placed American allies in mortal danger. He opposes the United States and is sympathetic to its enemies, like Putin. It's obvious every time he opens his mouth and every time he dumps reams of damaging information into the public square, even as he spares authoritarian regimes such as Russia and Red China the same embarrassment. If you dance with WikiLeaks, you dance with the devil. Second, Americans should unite in opposition to foreign attempts to influence election outcomes. If you think that well, let's put it this way. Trump supporters don't want to acknowledge that the Russians were trying to get Trump elected because, well, that hurts their vicarious egos. Oh, Trump won on his own. Well, you know what? Trump did win on his own, but the Russians were trying to influence the election in his favor. Something that I guarantee. I mean, do you remember before Election Day when Trumplicans, paranoiacs that they are, were all on about conspiracy theories about how Hillary Clinton was going to steal the election and blah, 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 voter fraud on a continental scale, and blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, they thought they were going to win. Sure they did. Yeah, there's a great level of confidence if you're making up conspiracy theories in anticipation of your guy losing because you wouldn't be able to admit that, you know what, we shouldn't have nominated the bastard. But Trump won because Hillary was terrible. terrible candidate, just terrible all the way around. By the way, came out yesterday, she might be thinking of running for mayor of New York City next year. She's never going away! Oh, boy. Because, you know, she wants to run again. I mean, if she doesn't destroy her liver with all the drinking that she's doing, or been doing the past month or two, she wants to run again, and I have no doubt that she will. If she's still alive, anyway. Yeah, the question is, will the Democrats actually be fool enough to nominate her? I mean, they were foolish enough to nominate her this time, and look what happened. She couldn't even beat Trump. Would they really do it again? Gee, that'd be like Nixon running in 1968 because, well, just the Republicans didn't have anybody else. And he won. That's something to think about, Trump supporters. How would you like your candidate, your guy, your demigod, your leader to lose in a rematch with Hillary Clinton in 2020? I can't believe the Democrats will do that. They'll nominate Julian Castro. That's what Democrats do. Of course, they do it on a 16-year cycle, don't they? That would augur for 2024, actually, now that I think about it. But oh, yeah, what America needs, a Trump-Hillary rematch. Jeez. Oh, gosh, that would be... I don't even know how to describe that. At any rate, Americans should unite in opposition to foreign attempts to influence election outcomes. Sounds reasonable, right? I mean, if it worked, if it worked for you this time, though it didn't actually get your candidate elected, but you don't want that suggested that your candidate didn't win. He had Russian help. No, he didn't have Russian help. He won on his own. But if it helped you this time, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. Is the bottom line. So, and Americans, as all of us, we shouldn't want foreign powers to attempt to influence our election outcomes. Right? I mean, that's a double-edged sword if I ever saw one, metaphorically speaking. I mean, it's fair to ask whether Russia did, in fact, attempt to influence American public opinion through illegitimate means. It's one thing for foreign leaders to publicly criticize candidates. It's another thing entirely to steal information, plant fake stories in the media, and otherwise use deception and subterfuge to influence our democratic process, small d. I don't know why French capitalized that, actually. But, I mean, that is subversion. Put your Cold War hats on again, those of you my age and older who remember the Cold War. Yeah, you have to be about my age or older to remember the Cold War, don't you? Yeah, it's too bad that it's become that forgotten that quickly, because that is the epitome of Soviet espionage and subversion, and the fact that, the old evil empire didn't have the internet. They didn't have cyberspace. Can you imagine what they would have done with cyberspace? Probably something a lot like what Putin and the Chikoms and the Nokos and the Iranians are doing with it, which is not good for us. Now, the bottom line is, Trump supporters, shut up and listen. We can't be afraid of the truth. I know you don't care about the truth. The only thing that you measure things by, your only yardstick is, does it help Trump or does it hurt Trump? But that's not truth. That's amoral partisan self-interest. That's hackery. No pun intended. There has to be a complete and, to the extent possible, without disclosing vital intelligence assets, transparent public investigation of Russian intelligence activities in 2016. And there's going to be, in the Senate, was it McCain? Was it Senator McCain? I can't remember. Was it? No, McCain and Graham, yeah, I know, Darth Queeg and Mini-Me, but they're right about it in this case. There's going to be a Senate committee that's going to investigate Russian intelligence activities in 2016 as directed against the 2016 election. We have to examine actions and intentions. We have to examine the extent of the damage, if any, and gauge as much as possible the impact on our politics. This is a matter of, guess what, Trump supporters? National defense. Why did the Russians want Trump to win? And rather than question Trump, you just embraced Putin. What's the matter with you people? It's vital that we protect our constitutional structure from foreign enemies. Enemies foreign and domestic. Now, in the weeks since our intelligence agencies accused the Russians of meddling in the election, however, it seems like parts of the GOP have been transplanted to the Berkeley Quad circa 1971. There's anti-government paranoia. This is all a conspiracy against Trump! Yeah, Joe, that could have come right out of your mouth. And moral equivalence. So what? America interferes with foreign governments all the time. Remember when Trump actually said that? When an interviewer pointed out that, well, Putin is a murderer. He has political opponents murdered. Well, we have political opponents murdered too. Yeah, Trump is rock-ribbed conservative. Yeah, sure. See, that's the power of polarization. The quest for victory, domestic political victory, transforms you into the very thing you once claimed to hate. In other words, Republicans have become Democrats. Never thought I'd ever see the day when there would actually be truth to the old expression, the old adage, there's not a dime's worth of difference between the two parties. Well, it took Trump mania to make it happen, to make it a reality, but here we are. Third, politicians, including the president-elect, shouldn't publicly attack intelligence agencies simply because those agencies reach disagreeable conclusions. Again, you want to reform intelligence and clean all the leftists out of the intelligence bureaucracy, be my guest. This ain't the way to do it. No, the U.S. intelligence community isn't perfect. God, no. Yes, there have been times when intelligence was not just flawed, but politicized. But politicizing it in the other direction is a good idea? The problem is not politicized intelligence, but in which direction and in whose favor? In a partisan sense? Isn't the idea to depoliticize intelligence, period? Not just flip the politicization the other direction? But it is unprecedented for the President-elect of the United States to cast aspersions on intelligence conclusions before he's seen the evidence. And we're going to get to that last part in the final segment, so I'll just tease it for now. Well, it was unprecedented before Trump. See, no good can come from this development. None. It places pressure on eager-to-please bureaucrats to tell the incoming president what he wants to hear. In other words, politicizing it in the other direction. It antagonizes hostile bureaucrats, incentivizing conflict between the Oval Office and our intelligence agencies. Remember the last time that happened? Full-scale, mutual in both directions? Watergate. That's right, remember? The CIA was one of the power structures that brought down President Richard Nixon in Watergate. Just for historical reference, Trumplicans, I mean, this should concern you. You shouldn't want your hero, your leader, to end up the same way that Tricky Dick did. And in so doing, it makes the already difficult job of obtaining and evaluating intelligence that much harder at a time when the stakes are extraordinarily high. In other words, whom do you want the intelligence community fighting? America's enemies or Donald Trump? Where do you want their focus, Trump supporters? I mean, if you want Trump to make enemies enemies in the intelligence community, he should be doing so by proposing legislation to reform intelligence agencies, which is to say, to clean out all the leftists after 8 years of Barack Obama. That, and even before, that would piss off the left, but it would piss them off for the right reason. Like I talked about in a previous video. It used to be, Ben Shapiro's piece the other day. It used to be that all conservatives had to do to piss off liberals is just tell the truth. Tell the truth about them, tell the truth about how their ideology doesn't work, and conservatism does. That's all it took. Now it's, truth doesn't matter. Truth is irrelevant. The only thing that matters is, does it help Trump and hurt the liberals? Well, you could hurt the liberals by just being conservative. And as I have seen firsthand, Trump supporters could care less about conservatism. They've thrown their principles overboard They've thrown their principles overboard to follow after Donald Trump. They have become the enemy that they once condemned. Fourth, there is still no evidence that the Russians changed the outcome of the election. They tried, but there's no evidence that they actually succeeded. Trump would have won anyway, in other words. It is true that Julian Assange is anti-American. It's likely true that the Russians worked to disrupt and influence American public debate. And it's possible, or possibly true, that they did so to elect Donald Trump. But it's still wildly speculative to claim that Russian actions were decisive. And they weren't. Trump would have won anyway. But why did the Russians want Trump to win? Anything that's good for the Russians is not good for us. See, the Russians didn't hack voting machines. They didn't change vote tallies. Any fake news stories were lost like tears in the rain of news. How could this gets back to the issue of how can you parody Trump? It's almost impossible because he makes a parody of himself. The WikiLeaks revelations were but one small part of an election cycle that sometimes seemed to feature not just a scandal per day, but a scandal per hour. Scandal fatigue. See, remember, that's what the left learned a long time ago. Watergate was basically one scandal. There had been the Pentagon Papers and the firebombing of the Brookings Institution, I guess. But basically, Watergate was one scandal. What the left learned is you got to flood the zone. That's what Clinton did. He flooded the zone with scandals. He had all his sex scandals and Whitewater and Mena, Arkansas, and the travel office and cattle futures and Waco. They just flood, and the Chinese funny money scandal from the 1996 campaign. They just flooded the zone. And when there's so many scandals and every single day, the public's eyes just glaze over. They can't keep track of it all. They'd have to be, in other words, you'd have to be a political junkie, as we are, to keep track of all of that stuff. And as we ought to have learned by now, the vast majority of Americans are far from political junkies. The vast majority of Americans are entirely the opposite. They're completely disconnected from politics, which is why so many of them were swept along by Donald Trump. Oh, boy. You see, one of America's most well-known celebrities ran against one of America's most well-known politicians. After billions of dollars worth of earned and purchased, or free and purchased, what do they call it, earned? Free and purchased media. After millions of words of coverage, both candidates ended up where they began, hated by a majority of Americans. Indeed, Trump won despite being more disliked than Hillary. His unfavorability rating was a stunning 60%. Hers was only 55%. In a world where both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump were controversial figures for decades, are we really to believe that John Podesta's emails tipped the balance? Well, when you put it that way, it's implausible at best, which is what I said at the beginning of this video. The Russians favored Donald Trump. They tried to tip the scales toward Donald Trump, but Trump won all on his own. He didn't need Russian help. And Democrats are pushing that line because they can't come to grips with and admit that they lost because Hillary Clinton was terrible. And they made a mistake, a grievous mistake, in nominating her. And I said this way back almost a year ago. A year ago. When all the hypothetical general election matchups indicated that the two most electable candidates were Bernie Sanders for the Democrats, Marco Rubio for the Republicans. If both parties were interested in electability, it would have been Rubio Sanders, not Trump Hillary. And is it any wonder that voter turnout was down so much and that neither candidate could get a majority of the popular vote? As with so many pre-inauguration controversies, the hype is worse than the substance, and the hype causes even good people to do and say foolish things, which Trump supporters do on an hourly basis, just like their hero. Now is not the time to reevaluate clear truths about WikiLeaks and Russia simply because you may like the consequences of their improper actions. Nor is it the time to cast election results into doubt absent compelling evidence. It's time to investigate, not hyperventilate. And this brings us to yesterday and the issuance of the intelligence community report on Russian attempts to subvert the 2016 election, and pretty much says everything that I've just told you. Vladimir Putin personally ordered the attempt to use cyber warfare against the United States, but it didn't get Donald Trump elected. He got elected all on his own because Hillary Clinton was a terrible candidate. This is courtesy of Caleb Howe at Red State. The much-anticipated intelligence report, about which President-elect Trump met with U.S. intel chiefs yesterday, is public, and one revelation in the report is more significant than any other. Via, and clue in here, listen very closely, Trump supporters, via Fox News. Trump Central Hub. Outside of maybe InfoWars. Quote, a declassified U.S. intelligence report released yesterday directly accused Russian President Vladimir Putin of ordering a campaign to influence the U.S. election and hurt Hillary Clinton's candidacy. Findings made public after officials briefed President-elect Donald Trump. Close quote. Now, the debate has to date been bogged down in the useless and silly question of whether or not the Russian interference in our election had any material result. Essentially, whether they helped Donald Trump to win or not. Now, there is no doubt in my mind, nor in the minds of many other observers, holding up my hand again, that the actual end result of Russian attempts to affect the election was functionally nil. They simply did not create enough havoc or doubt to change the outcome of the election. It's a logically untenable position to believe that the news leaked from emails through WikiLeaks put about the DNC and the Clintons in particular was in any way a sufficient counter to the mountains of negative information that were released about Donald Trump. As I see it, it's not just plausible that it's just not plausible that it changed the outcome from a Hillary win to a Trump win. But that does appear to be what they wanted. Resuming the Fox News quote, Fox News alert. Russia's goals were to undermine public faith in the U.S. democratic process, small d, denigrate Commissar Clinton, and harm her electability and potential presidency, U.S. intelligence added. Again, shouldn't it matter to Trump's supporters, if they really are patriotic Americans, that an enemy of the United States wanted their candidate to win? It should have given them pause, don't you think? However, that is a wholly separate question from whether or not it was the intent of Russia to influence the election. And even more so, a separate question from the only really pivotal question, which is in two-part, did Russia engage in cyber espionage against American targets, and if so, from what level of government in Russia did the order so originate? We now seem to have some answers to both of those questions, at least in the considered opinion of the majority, consensus view of our intelligence apparatus in total. Yes, the Russians did use cyber warfare against the United States. They've been doing so for a lot longer than the 2016 campaign. And the order originated at the highest possible level. It came from Vladimir Putin himself. Remember KGB, spook, remember? This is his specialty. And yes, by the way, this is cyber warfare. It is the very definition of cyber warfare, penetrating our digital security and sovereignty for the purposes of causing disruption, harm, or destruction. Now, for the first part, I will not here in this video go over the evidence, which is solid, that Russia was involved in hacking against the United States. Many nations are. Have we not been paying attention the past few years under Barack Obama? And Trump, who yesterday received the briefing on the report that was leaked last Thursday night, pay attention, Trump supporters. Pay very close attention. Trump conceded this yesterday, just not for the cameras, of course. He conceded this. What was he going to say? I mean, I'll tell you what, Trump supporters, Trump is going to be the president. Trump won fair and square. He's going to be the president. And don't you want him to take his job seriously? Not be the Trump he's been for the past 40 years, but actually take his job seriously, be a responsible leader? No, it sounds like when the cameras weren't on, Trump conceded. He said, yeah, you're right. The Russians did try to hack the election. And no, that didn't put Trump in the White House. Trump won on his own. You would think if somebody would have the level of security in themselves to not have to, not be so sensitive. I mean, the left says, well, the WikiLeaks, well, I put Donald Trump in the White House. Hillary would have won if not for that. No, she wouldn't. No, she would not have. If you have confidence in yourself, you don't care what other people say. They're burying themselves. Turn the ridicule back on them. Don't Don't act so defensive like you don't really believe your boasts yourself. Trump conceded it, folks. What was he going to say? Which actually surprised me. Trump conceded that the intel community was right and that the Russians did try to influence the 2016 election. Trump conceded that. I'm surprised, but I'm also pleased, because that means just that maybe, just possibly, he might at some point actually start to take his new job seriously, which I think we would all want. Suffice it to say that it is the position of our intelligence community that Russia did this, that they have adequate and reasonable evidence for that position, and that Donald Trump no longer disputes it, in private at least. I fully expect a Twitter storm this weekend to try to cover that, so that his supporters don't go into cardiac arrest or something. I mean, President-elect Trump is, by the way, doing a good job with this information, and has, in my view, handled this a lot better than the last few days than the Obama regime has. I know that's a really low bar to clear, but we'll take anything we can get. The point here is the second revelation, though. Putin's involvement. Again, from Fox News. Dun. Quote, "We assess with high confidence that Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered an influence campaign in 2016 aimed at the U.S. presidential election, the consistent goals of which were to undermine public faith in the U.S. democratic process, denigrate Commissar Clinton, and harm her electability and potential presidency. We further assess Putin and the Russian government developed a clear preference for Donald Trump." And that ought to bother Trump supporters. It really, truly should. The fact that it doesn't is what is fundamentally wrong with Trump supporters across the board. That tribalism that we were talking about earlier in the video and in previous videos. The intelligence report said this campaign included cyber activity and other efforts. Now we go to a quote from the Washington Times. The report was highly redacted and offered no specific evidence of the hacking. That gets back to revealing classified intelligence assets and the like. Instead, reporting conclusions of the FBI, the CIA, and the National Security Agency on their assessments of Moscow's motives and intentions. Moscow's use of disclosures during the U.S. election was unprecedented, but its influence, and just parenthetically, doesn't it strike you out, dear viewers and listeners on the podcast, that the Russians considered the American people this vulnerable and this gullible as to be that easily influenced by their propaganda efforts and cyber attacks and so forth? Like I said, can you imagine what the old evil empire would have done back during the Cold War if they'd had the internet? Well, I think we're looking at a pretty good manifestation of it right here, right now. Moscow's use of disclosures during the U.S. election was unprecedented, but its influence campaign otherwise followed a long-standing Russian messaging strategy that blends covert intelligence operations, such as cyber activity, with overt efforts by Russian government agencies, state-funded media, third-party intermediaries, and paid social media users, or trolls, the intelligence community said in its report. A multi-pronged effort, in other words. While the CIA, FBI, and NSA all prepared the report, the NSA showed only moderate confidence in the conclusions that Russia's intention was to dent Mrs. Clinton and aid Trump. The CIA and FBI, meanwhile, had high confidence in those judgments, close quote. Now, this is somewhat of an area of personal expertise for Caleb Howe. And I expect the NSA is probably closest to accurate, but also the most likely to be deliberately circumspect in any public assessment of an intelligence breach. Because if there's an intelligence breach, you don't want to advertise what vulnerabilities are exploited, right? You want to limit the damage. I mean, you could say that the leftist infestation is in the CIA and FBI, and so reform those agencies, quietly clean those leftists out. Don't make a big to-do about it. It goes counter to the very concept of intelligence. Putin's direct involvement takes this to another level. His effort, successful or not, to change our election results in what he views as his favor is a very big deal. But even if you doubt his direct involvement, I hasten to add that our accusing him of it is an equally big deal. These are not minor matters. It is something of a dirty public secret that the United States is routinely the target of it's hardly a secret. Is routinely the target of cyber warfare and acts against us that, to a traditional line of thinking, would be considered such overt acts of war as to precipitate a real-world conflict. It is to say, acts that go above mere spying, which, by the way, also goes on every day between nations, even friendly ones. The digital age is a new world in international activity and espionage, and even overt attempts to cause disruption, to breach our very real cyber sovereignty, indeed to penetrate our national defenses in a very real way using cyber attacks, do not result in the same international incidents that, say, violating our airspace might. This reality can make it hard to believe that this was a very serious thing or that the intel community is being forthright in their assessments. It might be tempting to say, well, if they really did this, why aren't we at war? But they did do this. They do this. They'll continue to do this. Many nations do this. The cyber war happens every day across the planet. I mean, a lot of Trump supporters, most if not all, are, they hate globalism. They're the scourges of globalism. Well, then I guess you have to dismantle the internet then. I mean, what is more globalistic than the internet? You got to turn off the internet. You can't have internet anymore. If you want to, the world has been shrinking steadily over the past century, and at an accelerating pace. Well, if you want to grow the world again, don't you have to cut off mass communication? Logical, right? What has logic got to do with American politics in 2017? See, the Russians do, like I say, they did this, they do this. Many nations do. Cyber war happens every day. Across planet. It's a new world, and information is power. That is as true, if not truer, in the field of espionage and national security as it is anywhere else. The only difference this time is that we all know about it. It targets a much larger scale, an entire election, and the involved parties are at the very highest level. And it can't be left alone. And it cannot be a simple Democrat versus Republican political football. Actions must have consequences, whatever the form those consequences take. And it just does not fill me with any confidence whatsoever that Donald Trump will be the one in charge of making that decision.